Niining tumura mga kaigsunan, I invite you to open your Bibles to the Gospel of Matthew chapter 15. The Gospel of Matthew chapter 15, and we shall read responsibly verses 21 to 28. Matthew chapter 15, verse 21 to verse 28. Responsive reading, I will begin verse 21. Then Jesus went thence and departed into the coasts of Tyre and Sidon.
And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the sea coast, and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David, for my daughter is grievously vexed with the devil.
But he answered her not a word. And his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she crieth after us.
But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me.
But he answered and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs.
And she said, Truth, Lord, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith, be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. The Lord bless us in the reading of His most holy and sacred word. Our passage for consideration this morning, mga kaigsunan, brings us to a place which hit the headlines in the international news very recently. Yes, we read in verse 21 that the Lord departed into the coast of Tyre and Sidon. You know, mga kaigsunan, this Tyre and Sidon is part of today's Lebanon. These places here mentioned as Tyre and Sidon is actually part of modern days Lebanon. Unya, if you can remember just a few days back, this was the very country that has made it to the headlines in the international news. Yes, this is the very country north of Israel that was wrought by a massive explosion just a few days ago that was caused by highly combustible chemicals that is being stored in a warehouse. Gani sa pinakauna nga video nga akong nakita ni Adto, nagtuugid ko nga it was a form of terroristic attack. Kaya nga naman, puting dakuha ato nga. That I was really wondering, wow, dako na po nga bupat. Kaya obviously, ang pinaka-main suspect yun kung terroristic attack man ganito, matawag na itong terroristic attack, obviously that would be Israel. Kaya nga naman, Lebanon, iyang mga silingan, mga Arab countries, Muslim countries na, and Lebanon, Turkey, Syria, Jordan. Ang main suspect niya na surely will be Israel. And so, when I saw the video, I was shocked. Nga naman, kaya all along there was a smoke, and all of a sudden, the massive explosion. Na siguro makita lang nato sa kanabang mga salida na there is that bombing, nuclear bombing, or bombing, kanang ingon na to, by a missile attack or a rocket missile attack. That bisan pa man tuod og nabuol og nabalaka sa nakita sa nahitabo, but I was comforted to hear, not that I am undermining the situation, not that I am undermining the casualties and the damage it has brought. Upon I take comfort when I learned that it was not what I thought, that it was an attack, no? An aggression or a form of terroristic attack. But something that we can call negligence, perhaps. Nga naman, for that huge and massive volume and quantity of highly combustible material to be stored in a warehouse, dihagyod mismo sa pantalan, is something that is indeed gross negligence. But anyway, we will not be looking into that, mga kinsunan, but I just thought of bringing this to your attention so that you'll be able to have a feel na this passage that we are considering, which mentions about Tyre and Sidon, is actually historical, literal place that it indeed exists even up until now, because these places is now part of this country north of Israel that is now called Lebanon. As we read in our text this morning, the Lord was there in this place and had a close and personal encounter with a certain woman. Now, this incident, I must say this incident did not happen by chance. I would even say that it is very much like the Lord's encounter with the Samaritan woman at the well. What I mean is, this incident is by divine appointment. Nakatagda, purpose, planned, scheduled. Looking at our text this morning, mga kaibigan, we are introduced to a woman who faced a tremendous need in her life. She was desperate and unable to solve her problem. Now, very little is known about this woman. We don't even know her name. But what we do know is that she came to the Lord with a heavy burden, and her life was forever changed with this personal encounter with the Lord. She had come to Jesus with a great need, as you can see, pleading, praying, and then what? Possessing great faith that she is willing to settle even with the crumbs that fell from the master's table. And as you can see, the title of today's message, so desperate, she refused to be denied. So desperate, she refused to be denied. Here before us, mga kaibigan, is a wonderful testimony of persistent and persevering faith. Persistent and persevering faith. Something that we must learn and something that we must cultivate ourselves sa atuang tagsa-tagsa ka mga kinabuhi. Tungod niya na, let's look at this woman up close and personal. Firstly, let's consider his person or his identity. Look with me in verse 22, first part of it, where it says, "And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast." As you can see, the same coast. Tyre and Sidon, they are coastal places. And true indeed, that explosion that took place some days ago took place by the port area, by the seaside, by the coast. Now, what is it that we can learn here about this woman? Firstly, we are introduced to this woman being a woman of Canaan. She was a woman of Canaan. Now, in a parallel passage in the Gospel of Mark, we learn that this woman was a Greek, a Syro-Phoenician by nation. Syro-Phoenician by nation. Now, meaning, she's not of the stock of Israel. Okay? Siguro, kung ato din siyang lantaon in today's language, this verse tells us that she is a citizen of Canaan. She is a woman of Canaan. But by origin, she is a Syro-Phoenician woman. Okay? Maingon ba nato nga in some countries today, there may be what we call U.S. citizen, but they are Filipinos by origin. Nakuha na to? They may be citizens of America, but they are Filipinos by origin. Manang gitawag na ito Phil-Am, no? Filipino-American. Likewise here, we are introduced to this woman as a woman of Canaan because she is a resident of the land, but with regards to her origin and perhaps her race, Mark's Gospel in Mark 7 verse 26 would tell us that she is a Greek. Now obviously referring to her being a Gentile. She is a Greek and a Syro-Phoenician woman. So she belongs to this race, Syro-Phoenician. Now obviously that would give us a clue. Syro belongs to that place now called Syria. Phoenicia is the old name for Lebanon, in which Tyre and Sidon is a part of. Okay? Tyre and Sidon under Phoenicia. Today it's the modern day Lebanon. And so we move on. So what does it tell us about this woman? It tells us that this woman here is a woman of Canaan, a Syro-Phoenician by nation, and that brings us to one conclusion, that she's not of the stock of Israel. In other words, she's not Jewish. She belongs to the people that inhabits the land before the Lord brought his people to conquer the promised land. The entire land of Canaan, as well as its neighboring place, used to be known as Canaan, collectively as one. In ancient times, the whole land, and that includes Tyre and Sidon in the north, is part of this whole land that is known then as Canaan. And that is what we know about this woman. That she is that woman of Canaan, Syro-Phoenician, meaning she's not of the stock of Israel. Now, what else can we learn of her? Continuing in verse 22, not only that we learn that she is a woman of Canaan, that she is a Syro-Phoenician woman, and that she is not the stock of Israel, we learn that this woman is a woman with a heavy burden. Bukat ang iyahang gidaladala nga suliran. Where can we find that? Moving on in verse 22, look at what she said here. Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. So, in addition to knowing her as a Canaanite woman, we also learn that she's a woman of great burden. Bukat ang iyahang problema or dako ang iyahang problema o suliran. What else can we learn about this woman? We learn that this woman is also a mother. How do we know that? Now, obviously, because she said here, have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David, my daughter. So it tells us that this woman that is of Canaan is a woman with a burden, and that she is also a mother. For obviously, she comes to the Lord with this burden alang sa iyahan na anak na babae. Now, what is here for us? What is in here for us? We learn that she is a woman, and a woman of a Canaan, and a woman of a great burden, a mother at that, whose daughter was tormented by the devil. Ang mulong tagkaliot mga pagsunan. Ponder upon this woman. I am sure kanato nga mga inahan, I am sure kanato nga mga ginikanan, we can so relate how heavy a burden that she is having. Maghisgot na ganitag panglawas o kahintang o kondisyon sa atong mga anak. Grabe kayo ang kabalaka na ihatag ni anak sa mga ginikanan. And that would indeed tell us that this woman here is a woman with a heavy burden. How heavy was her burden? So heavy that she is so desperate to call upon the Lord. And why did I say desperate to call upon the Lord? Remember, she's not a stock of Israel. Wag siya labot, outsider siya. She's not in any way entitled to call upon the Lord. Later on, we get to hear more of this. But at this point, what I want us to see is, yes, you can just imagine how great and how heavy a burden this mother is having because her daughter is vexed by the devil, grievously vexed with the devil. Now, as we carry on sa ato ang pagpamalandong niini nga babae, as we look at the manner that she approached Jesus, it would give us the impression that she had prior knowledge about the Lord. Now, why do I say that she had prior knowledge about the Lord? Ato nang nasayran that she is not a Jew. She is a woman of Canaan. She is a Syrophoenician woman. That means, and that confirms, that she is not a Jewish. She is not of the stock of Israel. But, as you can see, she called upon Jesus as what? Lord, thou son of David. Now, I want us to consider this, mga kaibigan, and please follow me carefully as we consider this point. Looking at the manner that she approached Jesus, it would give us the impression that she had prior knowledge about who Jesus is. Ano naman? Dili ko siya taga-Israel. And how is it that she is able to call upon Jesus, Lord, thou son of David? How is it? Obviously, this Canaanite woman may have heard a lot about Jesus and of his wondrous works. Siguro daghan siyang nadunggan mahitungod nini nga Ginoong Hesukristo. She may have heard about how Jesus healed many people from their sickness and diseases. For obviously, ang mga tao nga nakasaksi o nakakita sa mga milagro nga nahimo ni Ginoong Hesus sa ilahang pagbalik dito sa ilahang mga dapit, dala-dala nila ang ilahang mga testimony, ang ilahang nakitaan o nasaksihan ng mga milagro nga gihimo sa atong Ginoo. And in this manner, these things may have reached her attention. She may have heard of how Jesus healed many people. And all this may have convinced her that Jesus is able to help. Siguro ma-imagine ba nato nga sa tanan nga iyahan ang nadunggan, prior knowledge, mingon nga prior knowledge before she met the Lord. Ma-imagine ba nato nga siguro sa wa pagid mo abot ang atong Ginoo diha sa ilahang dapit, she may have been contemplating in her, pwede ka anak ning mada ang akong anak ngadto niya? I am sure sa tanan nga akong nadungog, I am sure he is also able to heal my daughter. Nakuha na itong mga kaibigan? Perhaps, in everything that she may have heard about the Lord, the testimony of healing, the miracles and wonders that our Lord has done, it may have impressed upon her, convincing her that yes, this same Jesus, surely, if he is able to do all these things to other people, for sure, he will also be able to heal my daughter. So, this could have been what is taking place in her heart and in her mind. That's why I say, this incident did not happen by chance. It is by divine appointment. Na samtang siya pamalandong siguro diya siya kasing-kasing naguluna, kanusa ka nako ning mada kung anak ngadto kang Ginoong Hesus. Or perhaps she may have been contemplating and wishing, may unta o masaag diri sa Ginoong Hesus sa among dapit. Are we following? And lo and behold, this is what we are seeing now in this text. That's why I say, I am convinced that this incident, this meeting of the woman of Canaan and the Lord, is not by accident nor by coincidence. It is very much like the Lord's meeting with the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. It was a divine appointment. And lo and behold, the thing that she has been and may have been contemplating in her somehow have come to pass. That she need not think of making her way down to Israel to find for Jesus to heal her daughter. It was the Lord who called her way. Now, look, what is even more interesting here is this. She pleaded with the Lord, calling, saying, Lord, have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. Now, giunsa man niya, how is she able to call upon the Lord, have mercy? Kaya maghatag ka nato sa kasayuran nga, yes, she may have been convinced in her heart that this Jesus is no mere ordinary man. What more? She called Jesus as what? Thou son of David. You know, mga kaigsunan, we may be familiar with these words and phrases here, but you know, mga kaigsunan, for people during those times to be able to call upon Jesus as Lord, thou son of David, it is actually a confession and recognition on their part, saying that they believe that Jesus is the Son of God and He is the anointed Messiah. To which the Pharisees, the scribes, the priests, and the Sadducees during the time would refuse to acknowledge and recognize Jesus. Ang mga Pariseo niyadtong panahon na, they will refuse to acknowledge Jesus as Son of David. Much more, they don't want to call Jesus as Lord. Oftentimes, as you find it in the Gospel, they would call Him teacher or master, but never that they will refer to Him as Lord. And this is indeed worthy of our notice and indeed interesting to note, because here is a woman outside of Israel calling Jesus as Lord and recognizing Him as a son of David. Now, as we look at all this, mga kaigsunan, maghatag ini nato sa kasayuran that indeed, this woman not only had a prior knowledge of Jesus pertaining to all His miracles and healings and wondrous works, she may have been convinced in her heart and believed in all that she has heard about the Lord, that perhaps this Jesus is indeed the Messiah. Kung atong hinumduman, if you are familiar with that passage, with the Lord's encounter with the Samaritan woman in the course of her conversation with the Lord, she said, I perceive you are a prophet. Pero sa hinahinay nakamatikot ng Samaritan woman, nga dili ni siya ordinaryo nga tao. Lo and behold, sa diha nga nakita sa Ginoo nga nakabaton siya ni ana nga kasayuran, giinhan sa Ginoo ang iya nga pagtuo. So much so that at the end of their conversation, if you can remember, the Samaritan woman went out to the city and tell others that she has met the Christ. Remember? Primero ang iyang pag-ilang, I perceive that you are a prophet. Yet, in the course of their conversation, by and by, she come to a point of realizing, oh, this is the Christ. And you know what? This is what we are seeing here. All this while, this woman may have had prior knowledge about the Lord, not only about all His miracles and wonders. Hearing all this, it may have caused her and brought her to come to the point, convinced in her heart, acknowledging and believing that this Jesus is not just a mere human that is able to perform miracles, but that rather this Jesus is the Son of God. For after all, she's able to bring herself to call upon Jesus, have mercy on me, O Lord, thou Son of David. Look at that. Coming from a pagan, idol-worshipping woman. Indeed, it is very encouraging. Indeed, it is very interesting how this woman of Canaan is able to bring herself to recognizing Jesus and calling Jesus as such. Apan kaliwa ni ining tanan mga kaigsunan. We have learned thus far, right, that she is a woman of Canaan, that she is a woman of great burden. I want us to consider further that she is a woman in a great predicament. A woman in great predicament. Nga naman, after all that she had acknowledged about the Lord, after all her confession, O Lord, thou Son of David, have mercy on me. Just when she'd expect that the Lord would respond to her because she addressed Jesus as such. Look at verse 23. Look at verse 23. Verse 5. But he answered her not a word. Somehow, sa tuwa nga paglantaw kaganiha, you may be convincing your heart na, wow, she had it all right. Itawag niya ang atong Ginoo, Lord. Unya, nangayo siya kaluoy sa atong Ginoo. Unya, iha pa yung gila nga ang atong Ginoo is the promised Messiah. O thou Son of David. Everyone in that time, the land of Israel knows that thou Son of David is in reference to the Messiah. Because everyone knows so well that the promised Messiah would come from the line of David. But the problem is, the spiritual elite in their time would refuse to recognize Jesus. Meaning, they believe that the Messiah would come from the line of David, but it's not Jesus. Now, after all that she has said, after all the confession, na makaingon kita na, she had it everything correct. Sakto ang iyang pag-approach sa Ginoo. And that you would be tempted to think and expect that the Lord surely would answer and would respond to her. But, lo and behold, look at verse 23. After all that the woman had said, verse 23 will tell us, but he answered her not a word. Wow. Yes. You read it right, and you heard it right. Jesus answered her not a word. Now, munong tagadiyot, remember, we have been considering this woman, and we have learned that this woman had a very real need and a very great burden, and with much expectation in her heart, nga kung muabot lang yun ang atong, muabot lang yun si Jesucristo, kung ako lang yung mada ang akong anak ngadto kaniya, maayog yun niya akong anak. But the day and the time has come that she no longer would go out of her way to bring her daughter to Jesus. It was Jesus coming her way. And all that she heard from the Lord was what? Nothing. Yes, she had a very real need. She had a very heavy and great burden, and with much expectation that it's Jesus and Jesus alone that can help her. But lo and behold, when the day and time has come that she would meet Jesus, and after making her request known unto him, all that she heard was what? Silence. You know, mga kaibigan, this may seem harsh and difficult for us to imagine. Murag siguro initially o katong pamalandungan ba? Huh? How can Jesus do that? This may seem harsh and difficult for us to imagine. That after all that the woman had confessed, Jesus would answer her not a word. True. Pero kung atog yung sabton, ang atog yung pagpamalandungan, there is something in here that we need to acknowledge. And there is something in here that the Lord would want to impress upon the woman. For obviously, she wants to probe more and to put the woman into a test. And we need to understand that our God is sovereign. Jesus is sovereign. And when He answered it not a word, for sure, and you can be sure, that He has His reasons behind. Manong wa niya tubaga dihat dayon ang maunga babae. But somehow we can so easily jump into conclusion, gisnab, gibalibaran, gididma. You know, we can think many things about this incident. Upon sayri mga kaibigan, that the passage did not end there. The passage continues. But what I'm trying to bring to your attention is, this woman indeed was in a great predicament. Okay, with this heavy and great a burden, coming before the Lord, expecting that the Lord would indeed respond to her and would heal her daughter, all that she received was silence. Yes, this may indeed be hard and difficult for us to imagine, that Jesus answered her not a word. But there is something for us to learn. But, kung atogin lang taon mga kaigsunan, this may have been very disappointing and frustrating on her part. Kaya nga naman, after all that she said, and you can be sure that all that she said is in earnest and in sincerity and even in desperation, that she pleaded for the Lord to have mercy on her. Unya, the only answer that she received was what? Silence. Nga siguro, kung kita pa dito, Lord, balibari na lang ko o dili ka, kaysa nga imo lang bumul-bumulan. Isn't it true? Even in our personal human relation, we would rather that we would hear something from the person rather than for the person to keep quiet. Not only that, notice further his predicament. The Lord answered him not a word. We would also find that the disciples also could not be bothered of her predicament. Nga naman, look again in verse 23, the middle part. He answered her not a word, and look at this. And his disciples came and besought him, saying, send her away, for she crieth after us. As if it's not enough that the Lord never answered her, somewhere we find the disciples wanting Jesus to what? Shoo her away. Send her away. And look at the reason. She cried after us. Samok, kulit. Sigig pamutana, sigig siyagit. That is what it says, right? For she cried after us. Send her away, for she cried after us. Balda, sagabal, samok sa ato ang paglakaw. Now, it tells us the disciples were not sensitive, they were not sympathetic, they were unaffected. They could not care less of the burden, no matter how heavy the burden this woman may have. All they wanted is for the Lord to send her away. Again, this must have been shocking and very discouraging on the part of the woman. Kay alam kaniya, Jesus and Jesus alone is able to help her. And Jesus himself answered him not a word. What more? His disciples would want him to shoo her away. Apan, nindot kayo kay sa diha nga nagsugyot ang iyahang mga tinunan for him to send the woman away, somehow nitingog na ang atuang Ginoo. And look at verse 24. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. In other words, it's like the Lord telling and responding to the woman indirectly, although ang iyang pagtubag is not to siyang mga tinunan, but the content of her reply was pertaining to the woman. I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of Israel. It's like Jesus saying, I have nothing to do with you. I have nothing to do with you. You are a Gentile. Ingon siya diha, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Remember, she's a woman of Canaan. She's not of the house of Israel. Apan, sa diha nga nalungog ka na sa maong babae, at least she was comforted nga nitingog na ang atuang Ginoo. Even when the reply may have been again discouraging on her part, frustrating on her part, disappointing for her part, but I want us to notice the insistence of the woman. Look at verse 25 now. Having heard of the Lord, look at verse 25. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. Now, Lord, help me. Now, I want us to notice carefully. In verse 22, we read of this woman crying, have mercy on me. Can you see that? Verse 22. Now, he called upon the Lord, Lord, help me. Now, what is it that we are seeing in here? We are seeing in here the woman's insistence. In other words, she continued to insist. Nipadayon gid siya. Determinado gid siya. Kaya ang iyong pangayon sa Ginoo ang iyang gitinguha gikan sa atong Ginoo. Yani, what else can we find in here in verse 25? Not only that she cried for help, we find her in verse 25 that she worshipped. You see that in verse 25? Then came she and worshipped. Now, obviously, the word here, worship, has a picture of what? Not only that she came to her to cry, but she came to her in worship, meaning she bowed. And obviously, that bowing there simply is the kind of posture nga diin. Niyukbog din siya na iyahang tuhod na kalubod ug ang iyahang ulo naa diha sa yuta. That is the idea behind the word worship. Now, in here is the turning point of her life. She come to that place that she saw Jesus as more than just one that is able to help her in healing her daughter, but that she also to come to a point that this Jesus is more than just a miracle healer, but that he is Lord, that he deserves to be worshipped. Nakuha na ito mga pigsonan? Sometimes, we have the tendency to think of God as our healer, as our provider, as our protector. Nothing's wrong with it. But we need to understand that over and above all these things, God is God that deserves our worship. And so I say, here we see the turning point as far as this woman is concerned. Because she comes to a point that she sees Jesus not just a one that is able to perform miracles, to deliver her daughter from demon possession. She finds herself worshiping the Lord. And this is something I'd like us to understand, mga people. First and foremost, our relationship with God is that He is our God and we are His people, and that we are to worship Him. And the rest, what comes out of that relationship of Him being our God. Because He being our God, He is also our protector, our provider, healer, comforter, and so on and so forth. She called her, Lord, have mercy on me. In here, she cried unto Him, Lord, help me. But there's that one word that makes a difference. She worshiped. Look again in verse 25. Then came she and worshiped. Now, just when you think na niining tumura, kumbinsi niyo ng Ginoo. But even with such a moving and humbling gesture, mga kaigsunan, we read the Lord's response in verse 26. Look at the Lord's response. But He answered and said, It's not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. Wow! Makaluya, isn't it? Makaluya. Siguro, kung kita pa nga mabaw o pasensya, mubok kasensya, may pagkuha na lang kanitingog, Lord. Isn't it true? Nga naman. Because the words of the Lord here is indeed humiliating. Insulting can even be devastating. Nga naman. Tingnan siya niyo. It is not meet to take the children's bread in reference to Israel and to cast it to dogs. Dogs refers to the Gentiles outside of Israel. Jesus here is revealing to her that He had come to the house of Israel first, that it was God's plan to reach out to the lost sheep of Israel pertaining to the Jews and not the Gentiles whom He called here, he called and referred to in this verse as dogs. People of Israel, sheep. People outside Israel, dogs. Can you see that? And that is what Jesus is telling the woman here. It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. For obviously, Jesus knew very well that the Gentiles had no desire for the things of God. That at this point, the Gentiles were not ready yet to accept Him. And so, He said that it was not beneficial and it will not be right to rob the children, referring to Israel, in order to feed the dogs, referring to the Gentile. Now, for sure, these are not the words that this woman expected to hear. Gani, as I have said a while ago, for other people, this response of the Lord would have been an insult. This may have been humiliating, even devastating, a good reason for the woman to stop and give up hope. Nga siguro, sa ubang tao, igo na ni, ay, nasayop man na ko, abi na ko, siya naging makatabang ka na ko, abi na ko, siya naging makasulbad sa kong problema, abi na ko, siya naging makaayo sa kong anak, nasayop man di ay ko. Isn't it true? With all that she has been hearing from the Lord, it could have been enough to convince her that she is wrong and that she needs to stop and to give up on pleading before the Lord. But lo and behold, a while ago I brought to you the insistence of the woman. Now I bring to you the persistence of the woman. Insistence, persistence. Look at verse 27. And she said, Truth, Lord, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. In other words, the woman refused to be discouraged. She did not allow herself to be discouraged, even be depressed, even be affected by all that the Lord had said unto her. In fact, she persisted to say, Yes, you are right, Lord. Yet, dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from the master's table. True indeed. This is the very line that impressed me to come up with this title, So Desperate That She Refused to Be Denied. Okay, as you can see, up until this point, makita gid nato nga di gyud pabalibad ang maong babae. And what's the reason behind nga di gyud siya pabalibad? Because she's so desperate in her, because she's convinced in her heart that it has to be Jesus and Jesus alone that is able to help her daughter and that is able to help herself. That you look at what she said here, even the dogs ate the crumbs that fell from the master's table. And for her, a few crumbs from the master's table is all that she needs. Lord, sige lang. Bisan og mga tagak na gikan sa imong lamisa, igo na alang ka nako. Reflect upon the words of this woman. Lord, sige lang. Wala ko'y gipangayo. I'm not asking for something that is great and something that is huge. Even the drops, even the crumbs that will fall upon your table. To me, it is enough. Mahinumdum ko in another passage in the Gospel, there was that woman having that problem with profuse bleeding. Remember? Naalam kaniya, if I could but touch the hem of his clothes. What a faith! Naalam kaniya, Lord, I don't have to ask that you would heal or talk to me and converse. Alam ka na ko, if I could but touch the hem of your clothes. Wow! Same thing here. For this woman, so desperate, she refused to be denied, that she said that even with the small, tiny little crumbs that would fall upon your table would be enough for me. And this tells us that this woman in here, she may be a Canaanite woman, she may be a desperate woman, but she is a woman of great faith. A woman of great faith. She had enough faith to believe that Jesus had the power to meet her needs. And not just to meet her needs, most of all, to change her life. And that is what moved her, and that is what motivated her to persist. Remember, from insistence. Mingon gani ka insistent ka, attempt ka, insist ka, pero at the point of insistence, na balibaran kang hunong ka. Pero from insistence, she persists. Insistence, persistence. That she's so desperate that she refused to be denied. That as you can see, kaganiha verse 22, Lord, have mercy on me. In here, Lord, help me. In saying those words, it was her way of saying, Lord, where can I go? Ikaw lang ako ang paglaong. Kaya ako nagtuong na ikaw lang ang makatabang kanako. That is what the woman is actually saying here. Lord, help me. For if not, I can go and find help somewhere else. But that was not the case. She was so desperate indeed that she refused to be denied. And mga kaibigan, this is the kind of faith that we need to cultivate. Persistent and persevering faith. The kind that will continue to seek the Lord, believing that He and He alone is able to help. Hilabi na sa itong panahon karon. That while it could be kining panahon nga nahikawan kita sa pagsimba, some of God's people may have gone cold. Gone cold in a way nga komportable na lang, okay, online fellowship, online service, but the devotion in the heart is no longer there. Mga kaibigan, that is also my very great concern. that while on one hand we are thankful to the Lord that we can broadcast our messages and our service to bless many people as possible, but I am worried that some of us may have become cold na if given a choice, siguro may mga nalagta na, okay naman lang din yung mga inaan na nalagta, na nakalagtas pala yung magsipra, why traffic, di ka pala. No, mga kaibigan, I hope and I pray that we will not fall into that kind of condition. But instead, cultivate a persistent and persevering faith, the kind of faith that will continue to seek the Lord, even in difficult times, even in tough times, even in desperate times, nasama ni nga babae. The kind of faith that will not give up or abandon, but will endure to the very end. Isn't it encouraging? I hope you are greatly encouraged by the testimony of this woman. We have looked at the person of the woman. We have looked at and considered the persistence of the woman. Now coming down to the last part of today's message, the provision for the woman. And what is the provision for the woman? Look with me on verse 28. And I want us to notice here how the Lord recognized her faith. How the Lord recognized her faith. Look with me in verse 28, first part. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith. Now, kung atong mahinumduman, earlier in this passage, the woman received not a word from the Lord. And the next thing she heard from the Lord are very much discouraging words. Yet, the woman insisted, the woman persisted, so desperate that she refused to be denied, that to a point that the Lord, as you can see here in our verse, would have to commend her for her faith. And look at what Jesus said. O woman, what? Great is thy faith. Yes. These are the very words of the Lord unto the woman, recognizing the faith of the woman. Remember, this was the very same woman that we have been considering all this while. Not of the stock of Israel, a Canaanite woman, an idol worshiper, a Gentile. What else? Desperate woman. True. This was the very same sinful, idol-worshipping Canaanite woman when she first approached Jesus, who turned out to be a woman of great faith. Now, how do we know that she has great faith? Jesus himself said, great is thy faith. Now, what else can we learn from her? Now, not only that her faith was recognized by the Lord as great, notice also how the Lord rewarded her faith. Recognized her faith, rewarded her faith. What was the reward? Now look at this. Middle part of verse 28. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt, and her daughter was made whole from that very hour. A while ago, the Lord commended her faith as great. Jesus recognized her faith as great. Here we find the Lord rewarding her faith. And what was the reward? Look at this. Be it unto thee as thou wilt. In other words, just as you have requested, so be it. And lo and behold, by the word of the Lord, what happened next? and her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Now listen carefully, beloved, so that as we come to the last portion of this message. Because of the woman's great faith, it pleased the Lord to grant her request. Remember Hebrews 11 verse 6? But without faith, it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that what? Diligently seek him. The daughter of this woman that was vexed with the devil was healed, was made whole, because of her mother's great faith. Now, of course, I must say this. It is not the faith of the mother that brought healing. It is the Lord. It pleased the Lord, seeing that great faith, that the Lord convey and bestow his blessing not only upon the mother, but most of all upon her daughter. Now, as we reflect upon this testimony of this Canaanite woman, I am sure it would leave us saying, wow, amazing, how wonderful, how marvelous. Some of us would even say, wow, encouraging, inspiring, comforting, assuring. Now, I am with you. But that is not the very reason, and that is not the very ultimate goal that I want us to learn from this woman. Yes, we cannot help but be amazed, but marvel and be inspired and even be encouraged. But the thing that I'd like us to see in here is this. Listen carefully. We may not be at the same point of desperation like this Canaanite woman, but let us learn from her testimony. And what was her testimony? So desperate, she refused to be denied. Alam kaniya, it has to be Jesus and Jesus alone. Remember, gisnab siya, wa siya tinggi, wa siya tubaga, i-discourage siya. Upon she's so determined in her, Lord, where can I go? It has to be you, and you alone, and no one else. Something for us to reflect. Sa naglain-lain nga matang sa kalisod nga atong gitubang, sometimes we be tempted to think of what? Pull-back position. What if? What if? What if? We always think of alternatives, options, but learn from this woman. To her, there's no other option. It has to be Jesus and Jesus alone. Nabi ay mga panahon nga sa ito ang kuluyhon, muragwa magkutubaga, muragwa magyud. Then we resort to doing things our way perhaps, or referring and putting our trust on others aside from the Lord. No, mga kaibigan. This is the very lesson I'd like us to learn. Of course, there are many lessons that we have learned along the way, but this is the very main lesson that I'd like us to learn. We may not be at the same point of desperation like this Canaanite woman, but let us learn this so well. So desperate, she refused to be denied. For unto her, it has to be Jesus. Jesus alone, no one else. The Lord is pleased to convey his blessing upon her, not only unto her, but to all those who sincerely and earnestly seek him, and those who seek him in faith. My dear brothers and sisters, may we be encouraged. Pray in our heart. Ask the Lord, Lord, grant me this kind of persevering and persistent faith like this Canaanite, woman.